What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew version 1.0 decklist of the Commander in front of us. I quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So also, I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe. Consider checking out the links in the description below. I'd really appreciate it. Today, we're running through week 2 of Aether Drift, and we're taking a look at a commander I've been itching to get back to, and with all the new artifacts and the new set, I thought it was time. That's Bello, Bard of Brambles. You'll notice something a little bit different this week on the channel, and that's that the commander brackets is up top. We've going to start showing the beta version of all the brackets in all the decks that we brew going forward until the real one gets released in April. Just a way to make sure we're starting getting ourselves acclimatized to it and we know what's going on. But Bello is the 3-mana 3/3 Raccoon Bard from Bloomburrow. During your turn, each non-equipment artifact and each non-aura enchantment we control with mana value 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental, issues to its other types, and has indestructible haste, and whenever it hits a player in combat, we draw a card. Bello is a fun idea for a commander, turning your artifacts and enchantments into creatures, especially, mana value 4 or greater ones, right? The ones, that's what he says, and we can really take advantage of that in a couple different ways. We're going to talk about all the things we want to animate, and there's a wide range of them. The nice part is he can actually animate vehicles, which is cool, right? They will become 4/4s, though, but they'll still have other abilities. We'll talk about some helpers that just really help us along our game plan, drawing more cards, giving them extra abilities. And then Bello does have the ability to play some of our classic extra combat style game plans. So we're going to do that just to try to, again, get our 4/4s in for more damage since they have indestructible and haste. Okay. Well, what are we trying to animate? And there's a lot of ways to approach this. I think there's going to be people that swing towards artifacts. There's going to be people that swing toward enchantments. My list is swinging towards enchantments, but we still have some really cool artifacts. Giggling Skitterspike is one that when I immediately saw it, I went, this feels great for Bello. So when it attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So remember that this is a 4/4 with Bello out, meaning it's a 4 on attack. But we can make it monstrous by putting 5 counters on it. Now it's becoming a 9/9 that can heal 9 when it attacks. I know that that's, it's only going to probably happen once, but the truth is, it is optional. Also, it's indestructible. So, I mean, that's nice. At least it's a little bit harder to get rid of. Threefold Thunderhawk is a lot of 7 mana, but comes in as a 0/0 with 3 counters on it. With Bello out, that would be a 4/4 with 3 counters on it. When it enters our attacks, we get a bunch of gnomes equal to its power. So this is going to help us flood the board, right? Protect ourselves in combat. Because remember that for any of our artifacts and enchantments that aren't creatures, that only happens on our turn. Meaning as soon as our turn goes to our opponents, we're going to have nothing left up to block. So this helps because this gives us things to block with, right? And then we could sack artifacts to put counters on Thunderhawk. We could sack the gnomes to put counters on it. But I just like that the gnomes can be there to block, and help us out. Cybership will be we'll say when it just comes down to a player, we put the top 2 cards of that player's library on the battlefield face down under your control, and they're 2/2 Cybermen artifact creatures. Again, just a good way to protect ourselves on the ground with blockers while we're hitting our opponents with, the Cybership in the air. We got 2 mana rocks on this slide that both turn into creatures, Hedron Archive and Gilded Lotus. And this is where I think some of this deck does really well, is turning these Hedron Archives and these Gilded Lotuses into creatures that can actually also still tap, if they want to, right? We're not giving them vigilance, but my point is, you can use them for mana, or you can make them these creatures. Gruul Warplaw is a little odd. It's just a 4/4 that gives all your creatures trample, right? But with Bello out, it's a 4/4 that gives all of our creatures trample, and then they're going to be hitting a little bit harder for our opponents. Thran Dynamo, another artifact that can become a creature and give us mana. Obelisk of Erd, since we know all of them are elementals from Bello's ability, we can have Obelisk of Erd come in and give all of our elementals +2/+2, making them 6/6s. Mightstone and the Weakstone may look odd, but it's fun because it taps for 2 colorless. You can only use it to cast artifact spells, but that's okay. We do have enough of them. The point is, when it comes in, you either draw 2 or you give something -5/-5, which are both great abilities and can really help us out in a pinch. And then when we do go to cast artifacts, it can tap for 2 in order to do that. Thunderhawk Gunship says when it enters in, we're going to make 2/2 Astartes tokens with Vigilance. And whenever it attacks, all of our attacking creatures get flying. Again, a way to get our creatures in the air and a little bit less blockable to deal big damage. This is going to make more sense on the future slides, where we start to see the goal to make our creatures as dangerous as possible. Asceticism gives them hexproof. Bedlam says that creatures cannot block, making it very dangerous for our opponent. Berserker's Onslaught, giving them double strike. City on Fire and Fire Emancipation, both affecting the amount of damage that our sources would do, and it is triple for both of them, tripling the damage our things do. Gratuitous Violence doubles the amount of damage that our creatures would deal. Frontier Siege gives us 2 double green mana on each of our main phases. That's when we're going to choose. That just gives us access to more mana. Mana Reflection can double up the land mana from our lands, but remember that we have mana artifacts in this deck that are actually going to get twice it as well, so that can be very useful. Rage Reflection giving our creatures double strike, Street Riot giving them trample. Mirror March is something I'm trying because I think its upside is huge, right? Whenever one of our things on our turn, let's say I play Rage Reflection, right? It's going to come in, I'm going to flip a coin until I lose a flip. I get that many copies until end of turn. Well, now, Rage Reflection's, I guess, a bad option because they can't have double strike more than once. But let's think about something like Fire Emancipation or something like Gratuitous Violence. Well, now you have a chance to +9 or ×9 ×27. You know, there's options to just rake up the amount of damage you can do in one turn. Yeah, more often than not, it's probably just going to lead to just more 4/4 attackers. But hey, more 4/4 attackers is huge because I think it's really important. And remember, when you're making copies of a permanent, you're making copies that retain the same mana value. So Bello is going to animate the copies as well. Sunbird's Invocation can help us dig through our deck when we cast a spell. Reveal the top X, where X is that spell's mana value, and cast a spell from X among them for cheaper. Uncivil Unrest gives all of our creatures that come in riots, they can either get a counter on them or haste, and whenever a creature with a counter on it deals damage to a permanent or player, we get to double that damage instead. We have other ways to get counters on creatures, so that's going to become important. And then a Natural Growth, doubling the power and toughness of each creature every combat we control. A good way to, again, make our things just more of a threat. The truth on that section is you can pick just about anything you want to as long as you're fulfilling that 4 mana value thing. I've just tried to pick very offensive things so that I'm always hitting hard and can bring the threat to the opponent I'm the most worried about. But all right, how do we have creatures, utility creatures, that aren't going to be animated that can help? We have things like Goblin and Archimancer in the early game, making things a little bit cheaper. Goreclaw is going to make our bigger creatures cheaper, but is going to give trample every turn if it attacks as well, which is huge. Kodama might be my favorite in this section. If we have permanent comes in under our control, if it wasn't put on the battlefield with Kodama's ability, we could put a permanent with equal or lesser mana value from our hand onto the battlefield. This can be really helpful if you can cast a mana 4 or greater artifact or enchantment and put another one with less mana value that's still 4 or greater down for free. You've now got 2 attackers with Bello, for that amount of mana. That's your key interaction with Kodama. Or in Frostfang to give all of our attacking creatures Death Touch, again, works very well with Trample. And then whenever one of them hits, we draw a card. So with Frostfang or Toski and Bello out, we're drawing 2 for each hit instead of 1. And then the Great Worm is here to help put counters on the things that are hitting so they become even harder hitting, right? Become even more of a threat to our opponent in the process. But all right, I think the key thing to take our game plan from good to really good is to take multiple combats, because they're indestructible on our turn, so we're never worried about taking more than 1 combat unless something has a ability like Wither, because they can take as much damage as they want to. They have indestructible. And they all have haste, so if I ever take an extra combat, they're going to be able to attack, right, because they have haste. So there's a lot of ways to do this. You have single target uses like Relentless Assault or Great Train Heist. That allow you to just do it for 1 turn. You get 1 extra combat this turn, and Heist does actually let you add a little bit extra mana for First Strike. But the one we really care about, and the one we're going to try to make happen, is Aggravated Assault. This is an enchantment that won't get animated, but for 5 mana, we can untap all creatures we control and take an additional combat, and that could be done at sorcery speed. That is 5 mana, and we are in green, so we can ramp up, but we can actually help that with a couple cards. Bear Umbra can be put on a creature, and it says whenever that creature attacks, we untap all lands we control. This won't get animated, remember, because it is an aura, but this can animate something very good and make sure that technically with this plus Aggravated Assault, as long as the creature this is attached to doesn't die, we're always going to be able to take extra combats. Same thing with Nature's Will. Whenever one or more creatures we control do a combat damage to a player, we get to tap all lands that player controls and untap all of our lands. Because we can only do Ag Assault at sorcery speed, we can't activate, Ag Assault in response to the Nature's Will untapping our lands like you could with other abilities. But Nature's Will basically hopefully guarantee, as long as I have 5 lands, that if any of my creatures hit with Nature's Will and Aggravated Assault out, we're going to take another combat, and we can do that as long as we're hitting our opponents. And I think in most games, it's probably not going to take very long for that just to win, end a game on that board. Well, we said it before on the show, and we'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is our version 1.0 shot at it. And as we go into testing, there's a lot of things to consider. And for this section, I will say that I'm choosing to build Bello back for myself. I'm choosing to test it again. And these are 3 cards I'm adding to my Bello list that I didn't add here simply because of the price tag. Chroma's Memorial still sits at about $30, but it gives all your creatures flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, and pro black and red, again making them even harder threats that are going to help you against some of the other key flying decks like dragons and demons that they're probably not going to be able to block them, but can still help you out a ton. The Immortal Sun sits, if I recall correctly, about $15. Players can activate Planeswalker's Loyalties abilities. At the beginning of your draw step, you draw additional card, 1 less to cast. Everybody gets +1/+1. Again, it's just another artifact that will get animated and help our board. And then, it's polarizing every time we talk about it, but the One Ring makes a ton of sense, right? It can get animated. It's a card draw outlet. It can help you get into the right things. Comes down and gives protection, so it's great to come down, attack, and then you can't be bit, then you can't really be hurt on the turn back around until it comes out, right? But it's going to, card draw and all that. The truth in testing is I think we need to figure out, are we hitting hard enough, or do we need to focus on having some more things laid back to be defensive? I'll tell you, in the testing that I've done so far with my version of Bello, the deck does a good job of being offensive. It comes down to picking the right players at the right time. If you pick the wrong player to knock out, you're going to get swung back on. But the truth is, if you could pick the person you think is the most threat and start them to force either having to deal with these 4/4s that may be tripling up their damage or what have you, I think you can prolong the game long enough to take over a game. But let's get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtesting is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to determine what a perfect game plan for our deck is. It's to see our deck in action in the first few turns of the game, learn how to set up, and start realizing, what play lines we have at our disposal. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Kodama the East Tree, which is great. We have 2 ways to get up to it. We have Beseiju of Reaches Skyward, who comes in and gets us 2 basic forests to our hand, or we have Thrain Dynamo, which can add for triple colorless. This could be an interesting way to start. And hey, we see Gittling Cedar Spike. So we got a nice amount of stuff here to start. We're going to take the first couple turns off unless we find something that we really like. Here's a card that I haven't really seen talked about. And I don't really see it very high up on Bello's page, but I really like it. Credo Clearcutter. So this is a card with Prototype from Brothers War. If you didn't play at the time, you probably have no idea what this card is. So its ability is that it can tap to add a green mana for its power. Well, the way Prototype works is that you can play it for its prototype cost, but it comes down with a different size. But when it's on the battlefield, it's still a 6-mana permanent, meaning it's going to be a 4/4 while Bello's out, meaning it can tap for 4 mana. So just a very interesting way to come out and get more mana in the long run. And in fact, here on turn 3, I think it's my play, right? Have it come down. Now next turn it can tap for 1. But on a future turn, it might be able to tap for 4, right? Because of that. I don't see the point in running Bello out. I think it's just Thrain Dynamo here, because this is going to give us more stuff for later turn. And we want to be careful with Bello, because I feel like as soon as Bello touches the battlefield, right, somebody's going to want to get rid of it. So now we have 8 mana. Right, that's a lot of mana. I like the idea of like Conjuring plus Beseiju just to set up some more. Look to Bello next turn, and take a nice swing. Next turn we would be at 5 here, 6 on the Clear Cutter, 9 on the Dynamo. So my thought here this turn is Conjuring, we're going to call Elemental, right? Because, that's right, it's Molten Echoes I'm thinking of, where you choose the type. Here we don't. And then Beseiju, which lets us go get 2 basic forests and put them in our hand. So we come to our next turn, right? Now this is up to 2. This lets us put a target land card from our graveyard on top of the library. We don't have one. So now remember 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's a lot of ways I was thinking about doing this. If I play Bello, right, these two immediately become creatures. So will the Dynamo, but I think I'm going to end up using the Dynamo this turn. So I think the Dynamo is going to stay back here, but these two immediately become creatures, right? I haven't used this yet, so this is going to turn into a 4/4. So now I have 5 mana. And my thought here is the Skitter Spike. I play the Skitter Spike, right? Flame Conjuring goes off. I don't have a red mana, so I can't copy it with the Conjuring. That would be good to maybe a Farseek for a red, but that's okay. And future turns, right, we'll be able to go get, or next turn we'll be able to use more red mana if we're going to play things that aren't that. But Skitter Spike comes in, and it's a creature, right? But it is also a 4/4 because of Bello. So now we just go ahead and attack this turn. This deals 4 to everybody on attacks, and we get some attacks in. Maybe we get a card draw or 2 here. And we'll just pitch a land for it. But once we end our turn, right, these two don't become creatures. Skitter stays a 1/1 because it's not our turn. Same thing with the Clear Cutter. The Clear Cutter is now back to a 1/3 because it's not our turn. And this is why it's kind of nice to keep a few of these creatures, artifact creatures, that are creatures on their regular sides. The Skyward's going to flip over here into a 0/0 for each 1/1 for each land you control, but it's going to share the same mana value as its front side, meaning that it'll actually become a 4/4 that gets +1/+1 for each land we control. So it's going to become pretty darn big. But my thought here is Kodama for 8. So we got 2 left over. Maybe something like Cyber Ship. So we've got 2 left over. Tap everything else, and I think I could pay the red for the Cyber Ship, right? But when the original Cyber Ship comes in, remember I can put a permanent with less mana value for free onto my hand. We'll pick the Uncivil Unrest. Now we'll go to combat. These guys can all attack. Unfortunately, none of them have a counter on them, but that's a-okay. We can work towards getting counters on them right at a future point. But now all these guys attack. We probably end up drawing 2 or 3 cards. We're at a potential here with this Ag Assault to be towards having some fun with that. But the nice part is the Skitter Spike got its damage there. Both these Cyber Ships hit, so we probably got some 2/2s, face down 2/2s. We'll go to our next turn. Now we can potentially Conjuring twice. I've got 1 extra combat here. Let me think about this. On just the Ag Assault alone, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 12, right? 13. Right, so I have 13 mana, so I can play the Ag Assault and use it twice, which I feel like could be huge this turn with all these attackers, and then the 2/2 Cybermen from the ship. So that's probably it right there. Play the Ag Assault and just we got to tap the Dynamo and the Clear Cutter to do it, but just take attacks. Sorry, when the Ag Assault comes in, I can put Sanctum Weaver down for free. Actually, I'll put the Ancestry in for free. And again, I think that's a good spot there to end. Again, no, obviously sans removal, right? But the truth is, the nice part about a lot of those things is they don't become creatures on my opponent's turns, and then they're harder to take off the battlefield. Keep it a 4-lander here with Flame Shadow Conjuring again, Rhythm of the Wild, and their Anarchomancer. The Anarchomancer is great to get down early, right? Because then it starts reducing the cost of our spells, right? We see the Visager again, and this time we see a Natural Growth. So here we've got 3 mana, but red, each spell that's red or green costs 1 less to cast. So I think it's Visager, right? Because this will go get a couple forests to our hand. And will start us through that process, right? So the next turn, this goes up to 2. Play a land. I'm thinking, Rhythm plus Cetizen Champion? Have it come in with a +1/+1 counter. And just start building up our board. Since we got a couple enchantments we're going to play, that Cetizen Champion can grow. Now the Visager is going to flip over. When it flips, does it exile? Yeah, it does exile. So this is actually going to trigger Setessan Champion to draw us a card. That's what I like about Setessan Champion so much, is all those enchantments are getting us, an extra. But just a 5/5, right? Because Bello was an out. I've got 5 mana. I could go Berserker's Onslaught, set up a nice attack next turn with Bello. We don't have the mana for Unnatural Growth. We're still a little bit off. Right, we're still a little bit off. The Courage, I could have come in and hand out some haste. My thought here is the Berserker's Onslaught. If I play the Conjuring this turn, next turn Berserker's Onslaught's 4 mana, Bello's 2, but I wouldn't be able to Flame Shadow the Berserker's Onslaught, right? I'm just trying to think of what's the best use of all my mana, right, to be the most of a benefit. That would be down to 3. This is down to 3. That's down to 3. This is down to 3, so we still can't do both of those. So it's either 4 or one of these. The Courage is nice on future turns, right, because it could start giving our things haste. That actually may not be a bad idea, because then if I go Bello plus the Onslaught next turn, the Onslaught would have a buff for Double Strike. Maybe we'll do that. Setessan Champion will draw us a card. If we happen to hit anything with low enough mana cost, we can cast it. We'll have the Courage come in with a counter on it. We don't really need it to attack this turn. Sorry, that would have come in with a counter. It was out when the Rhythm of the Law was out. We get attacked with the Setessan Champion this turn, but otherwise, I think we're just trying to, again, continue setting up. So here, man, on Civil Unrest is even almost better. We don't get Double Strike, but now everything with a counter on it, that actually, I think, makes more sense. Go Bello plus Uncivil Unrest. We'll have Bello come in with a counter on it. Uncivil Unrest is going to come in with its choice of Riot twice. So I think we'll do 2 counters on it. Again, it's my understanding that I can do Riot twice, so 2 counters on it. We're going to draw from Setessan Champion. +2/+0 and haste from the Courage onto Bello. +2/+0 plus haste onto the Uncivil Unrest because of Enduring Courage. And I think we just attack with these 5. Now Bello's a 4/4. It's a 6/4 with dealing triple damage, or double damage, so it's going to be a brutal attacker. I think we just take this brick and attack. And then next turn, again, provided the board state survives, which, remember, this becomes an enchantment. If the Courage dies, it comes back. This is a pretty huge die, so it would only be a board wipe. So if it comes back to us, we just Onslaught, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I could do that. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm 1 mana off being able to do both, right? Onslaught and the Unnatural Growth, but I could do Onslaught plus the Flameshell Conjuring and just take another huge attack. And again, this is where Bello, I think, exceeds. Again, there you have to have the scenarios where everybody leaves everything up, but the point is, if that happens, right, you're in great shape. Here we're keeping a 3/4-lander with Agasol, the Clear Cutter, and a Cyber Ship. We draw the Thicket turn 1. I think that's a pretty obvious turn 1 land play since there's not much else we could do. Turn 2, we're just 1 turn away from the Clear Cutter, and I think, like normal, I'm going to get the Clear Cutter down here on 3. Skitterbeam Battalion's another fun one. So when it comes in, you make 2 copies of it. So for 5 mana, we can get 3 2/2s that'll eventually become 4/4s with Trample and Haste with Bello. So we get the Clear Cutter down there. Now here on turn 4, we have 5 mana, right, because it's a 1/3. I like Unnatural Growth just as a way to start making threats to our opponents in a future turn. I mean, the Battalion isn't a bad idea either. Frostfang's not a bad idea. If I do Bello, I can't cast anything else, right? So that's my thought, is why run Bello out if it's the only thing I can do in the turn? Skitterbeam might make the most sense if I'm going to commit to Bello next turn. That would give me 3 attackers next turn, right? But I could also, Unnatural Growth this turn, play the Skitterbeams next turn. They would still be 4/4s with Trample and Haste because of the Unnatural Growth without Bello, and could still be a big threat. That's what I'm thinking. So now I've got 5 6 mana. But if I go through combat, it would be 7, right? Because Cradle, it could double. But again, I don't think I see a point in that. Because I think we're either playing the Skitter Beam. Well, like, so 4 would be Skitter Beam, or say 4 would be what? Ag Assault plus Bello, or we just cast this Skitter Beam for its prototype. And that's my thought. They can attack this turn. Remember, there are 2/2s that are going to get doubled to 4s, which we could attack if we want to. They just won't get anything special. But now my thought is this turn, I've got access to 6 mana. If I play Bello, though, it's still 6 mana. Because this would be 3 for Bello. Then this goes up to a 4, so that's 6 mana. And so we actually got more mana. And then I'll play the Cyber Ship, which will come in as a creature. Now you go to combat. These guys are 4/4s that double to 8/8s. This is a 4/4 that doubles 8/8. Bello's a 6/6, but Bello's not attacking, obviously. Hit your damage. We probably draw 2 or 3, I'd imagine, right? And then come back to our turn again. I apologize. The Natural Growth would have been a creature that combat as well. But it is now on our turn. Mana Reflection would be fun to get some extra mana from things. What makes the most sense this turn to deal the best amount of damage? Boseiju could be good. I could do like Ag plus Boseiju. Get the forest going. I'm trying to think of how do I attack with this. I could attack with this Cradle Cutter. I don't have to, use it for mana. Because my thought here is we want to get the most damage out we can this turn. This would be 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, right? So you have just all these things that are becoming big damages. And then next turn, right, I think we're just set to go for the Ag Assault and just keep ramming it down our opponent's throat. I know, Bello, very one-sided, only on our turn. It's a very tricky deck, but I think it's very interesting. And this one technically is a bracket 2. I think this was one of the decks that I thought probably could be an argument made for bracket 3, because although it doesn't have any game changers, it does technically have a 2-card combo in Nature's Will and Ag Assault. Although there's an argument on the combo, right? Because you still need the creatures to do it, and Bello's the thing. So it's kind of like it's a 3-4 card combo if you really think about it, because you have to keep the creatures there to do it, which is why I thought it was a 2 for that reason. But I think Bello's going to hit above its weight class into the right matchups. Let me know what you think of Bello, and I will catch you on the next one.